Jamie Austin here, and welcome back to another episode of Real Estate of Mind. We are so glad to have you. Today's episode is brought to you by Cross Country Mortgage with Michael Abrams, who's been on the show a couple of times. And if you haven't checked out that episode, it's actually really informative. Today's guest is very special. We're having Rob Aigner on the show today. He's actually one of our very special in-circle people, real estate people, who not only owns one of our Keller Williams offices, but he's also a personal friend. And I don't want to really steal his story because it's way too interesting, and actually this could probably be 6 episodes, but I'd love to have Rob tell you a little bit about himself and how he got here. Rob, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
6 episodes, I'm looking forward to that. Well, I'll start a little ways back to just tell you a little bit about myself. Born in Oregon, Portland, Oregon. My parents are European immigrants. They came over in the 50s, and they're Holocaust survivors. And I bring that up because it's a big part of my sort of foundation and orientation to everything.
Yeah.
They were huge influences in my life, and even as it relates to real estate, real estate was a big part of their portfolio that they built over the years. Being in Portland, and part of their retirement, and so I've learned a lot from them, and so it's kind of a natural place for me to start, aside from the fact that they helped me start, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, growing up in Oregon, I was an athlete. I was a junior Olympic ski racer.
Wow.
Ultimately, when I kind of hit my apex there, and moved to New York after college, University of Oregon, and got into the advertising business.
Wow.
And while I was there in New York, I started acting as just sort of for fun, and maybe to meet girls. It's possible.
Never hurts.
That never hurts. And then my job in advertising, which ultimately was my last place, was at Rolling Stone magazine in advertising sales.
Very cool.
And that moved me to San Francisco, where I continued the acting, and eventually moved down to LA to pursue acting full time, which I did from about 96 to 2001.
That's so funny. That's when I moved to LA for acting, was 96.
Oh, yeah? There you go.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Maybe your agent knows my agent or something. Anyway,
we'll do lunch.
So yeah, exactly. And then how I got into real estate was actually somewhat related to acting, because I was on a set of a TV show I had booked, and a fellow actor, friend of mine, said, "Hey, dude, I made $50,000 today." And I'm like, "Wow, did you book a pilot? Did you do a commercial?"
Wow.
He's like, "No, I sold a house." I'm like, "You can make $50,000 selling a house?"
Wow.
And so I just said, I'm going to get my license. I can do it part-time, I thought.
Yeah.
And then my first year in real estate at Keller Williams, I crushed it. I was International Rookie of the Year for the company.
Oh, that's amazing.
And the return on investment, not just money-wise, but also the gratification of being successful at something, it was so much better than acting in that, you could send out your headshot a million times. You could go on a million auditions, and they're like, "Oh, you're too tall, you're too short, you're too bald, you're not bald enough," whatever. And although I had some success as an actor, I was like, I put effort into the real estate thing, and I got results out. So I slowly weaned myself out of the acting game and poured myself more into the real estate game. And eventually, after about 3 years as an agent, I was asked to be a team leader, a manager of an office, and did that for about 11 years in total.
Wow.
And during that time, I started investing in offices. So now I'm invested in 7 Keller Williams offices, and do real estate investing. And I'm an operator of 2 of those offices. I'm the actual owner-operator, and the others I'm just a silent partner. And I'm also a MAPS coach, which is Keller Williams' coaching arm. So I coach primarily owner-operators and team leaders, but I also coach some agents. And then invest in real estate, and father of 2 and husband of 1 and all that kind of stuff.
That is amazing. That is really cool. That's great. And I completely identify with you on these. Like, it's one thing to move out here and to like have the hopes and the dreams of like everybody, but then I understand the whole mindset of like, because I too had some success as an actress, but then when you kind of just get out there and you're like, you're just tired of being told you're to this, to that. And then you finally find success in something and you're like, I can control this. Like, this is just based on my skill set alone. That gives you back the power.
100%,
right?
yeah. Because acting I loved. I still, I wouldn't say miss it, but I would do it again if an opportunity fell in my lap. And I even did a real estate. My acting skills really came into play as it relates to real estate because my Beverly Hills office, when I was the team leader in Keller Williams Beverly Hills, we were asked to be on Selling LA, which was an HGTV show, which I did for 2 years. And so most agents weren't comfortable being in front of the camera. And I was like, okay, now what do we do? And it was all, it wasn't even improv. It was just real. Yeah. So it was, that was cool. That was cool to have the blending of those two worlds.
Yeah, that was so funny. I was just telling these guys that I auditioned for one of those selling shows, not the one that you did, but a different one. And they were like, yeah, you've got the on-camera experience. That's great. Would you mind if we just made up a fake story about you having an affair with all these people on the show? And I was like,
yes, I'd mind.
Yeah, I'd mind. Like, I take this job very seriously. And they were just like, yeah, we need drama. And I was like, okay, now I get what this show's about. Thanks, but no thanks. So I was like, yeah, I'll find it another way. But anyway, that was really interesting.
I was really happy that the show we did, really, truly, the drama was about the real estate process. There was no... I don't think I would have done it if it was like, oh, you're having an affair with that person or whatever. I'm like, no way.
But, it just wasn't that kind of quality.
But there was enough real estate drama to make it interesting, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And I had you on the show because you have such a vast knowledge in your experience level with working in not only in LA, but in many different facets of the industry, that I wanted to bring Rob on board because we wanted to talk about technology. And technology has definitely shaped our industry in a way that I think, it's made a lot of agents nervous. And yet at the same time, I think if you're an agent that's like open and willing to learn, I've always said, like, even like when I started, I could tell that there were agents who were like, look, this is the way I've always done business. And then you could also tell that those are the agents that are like probably not going to make it because they weren't willing to adapt and learn and kind of be flexible. Like, this is one industry, I'm sure you'll agree with me, that never stays the same, right? It just doesn't. There's new contracts. Every time we turn around, there's new laws, there's new things that change the job. And everything about this job has changed, and it's never dull. I'll say that.
The thing that's constant is the change.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So you have to be willing to be open to the change because that's the only thing that's constant. So I would say, how has the real estate business changed, and how much has it stayed the same, would you say?
As it relates to technology?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I'll say, it's an important topic. I'm glad you're featuring it. It's ironic in a way that you've asked me to do it because, yes, owning these brokerages, I have an idea of, what the company's doing and what the company needs to deliver to the agents and what the agents need to deliver to the clients. So I have a really good sense of what needs to happen technologically. I would say I'm a boomer, like I'm decent with technology, but I'm glad I have millennial kids that can help me on things. So I'm not a guru on technology. But to answer your question, what I would say has stayed the same is it's all about relationships. The business has always been, and I think always will be, about relationships. There's always these questions of like, oh, will AI replace this, or will discount brokerages replace, or will, Redfin or Zillow or whatever it is,
Purple Bricks,
all that stuff. And I think when you look at the industry and the amount of time I've been in it, you see different players come in and out. At one point when I started in the business, it was help you sell, right? When the market gets hot,
I remember.
Then help you sell comes in because it didn't take a lot of skill to sell a property at that point. And then then the next evolution of company comes in, and the next evolution, and then technology came. So I think the constant is that to be successful, you have to be able to develop relationships and create trust to help people buy and sell their most valuable asset. So I think that part has stayed the same. What's different is, it used to be the realtors were in control of all the information.
Yes.
We were in control of the MLS.
We had the book. And then it became the MLS, right? And then the clients didn't have access to the MLS. Well, now, not only do they have access to the MLS, but they have access to everything we have. So we as agents or brokers need to be more knowledgeable and aware than our clients, which is really difficult to do in a rapidly changing market. Also, I think when you think about technology, when I got into the business, some agents had a website, some didn't. But it became increasingly more important to have a website. That was kind of like having a business card, right? Right. Well, now, sure, having a website's important. You can have one, but
probably your Instagram feed's more important.
Right. It's not really driving business to your website.
Not much. There was a time where people were counting their capture and their lead conversion from their website and all that. And I'm not saying that's gone.
Right.
But I'm just saying already the website has become less important than it was 15 years ago.
Absolutely.
And 15 years ago, it was like, oh, you don't have a website? Oh, you're out of it.
Right.
Now it's kind of like, if you don't have a website, it's like there's more important things you can do and still have a massive presence. So that's my initial answer.
Great point. And I would say, what is the value? Because I agree with you. And I started after the MLS was there, and then I would say it was really interesting because I had been in front of the camera for 25 years, and I kept kind of avoiding the social media because I thought, oh my God, it's like one more thing I gotta add. And then yet, over the time, I had a website, and then over time I was like, really, I gotta add the social media? And then it was like, wait a minute, this is not going away. This is now becoming even more key, which is when I made a really conscious decision. And my partner Jill and I really made a conscious decision. We're pivoting and we're really embracing it because it's like, this is not going away, so we better embrace it, and we want to get ahead of the curve. And now all of those other skills of being on camera now, it's like, as long as your content is good and you're really comfortable, now we're like having a really fun time with it. And we're like starting to reach people, and people are like, oh, and I was like, this is a really fascinating thing because I would not have assumed that maybe 5 years ago. But
I think it's really important for agents to realize they don't have to do every bit of technology that's available.
No, right.
You have to embrace some of it. You have to, do what you enjoy, what you're getting results from. You want to measure your ROI on anything.
Absolutely.
Like, you door knock, does that work for you? Great, then door knock. You get a lot of leads off Instagram, great, then do that.
Yep.
But you're going to have to use some technology.
Absolutely.
And but you don't have to do all of it, because to do all of it's overwhelming.
It'd be exhausting.
Yeah.
And then it would be like, putting all your eggs in one basket, or do you spread it all too thin and then you're never really good at anything?
That's right.
Yeah. So you want to pick up few things that you really need to put and really develop a skill set that you're excellent at.
100%.
Right? Okay.
100%.
And then what is the value of technology, and what are some reasons to be cautious about technology, would you say?
Yeah, good question. I would say the value of technology is, I look at it as leverage.
Okay.
So ultimately, the number one thing I think any agent needs to have, and sadly, so many agents aren't really using this tool to the utmost, but it's just a database. A database system,
yeah.
Right? Like if I'm going to say you have to have one piece of technology, I'd probably say a database, even over social media. If you could only pick one thing.
That's a really good piece of advice.
Yeah. So master that. But the advantage is that, like, if you don't have an assistant, or you don't want to spend the money on a transaction coordinator, there's all these things you can spend money on as a business owner, because that's what realtors are. They're business owners.
Right.
So you can spend your money on all kinds of things. You can spend all your money.
Yeah.
Right. And including on technology, and whether it's Boomtown or Zillow leads or whatever, you can just spend everything. So you have to be smart on your ROI. But the benefit of it is that if you pick the right things that work for your skill set, or where your skill set might be lacking, then it's leverage. It's like having an assistant. It's like having another person working for you, with you. Yeah. And that way you can focus more on the things that you're good at or that you enjoy.
Right. And I kind of find that, at least in the beginning, when I was a newbie agent, I kind of found like it was very easy to get distracted behind all the new stuff. Like, people were like, well, I'm just not going to get out there in the real world until my business card is done,
right,
or until my website's done. And then I fortunately was guided by a gentleman named Tom Dunlap, who I will give him a lot of credit for.
I know him.
Yeah, you know him. He was a great manager. And I started at Prudential in Beverly Hills, and he was just like, forget all that stuff. Like, pick up the phone and start getting out there and making calls. And so I didn't get distracted. So when I started mentoring other agents, I was like, I know you want to do the business card, and I know you want to do the perfect flyer. And
they have analysis paralysis.
Right, analysis paralysis, exactly. And I was like, it's not going to matter. None of that's going to matter. Don't spend money on any of that stuff. And they're like, but I just spent, $2,500 on the shopping carts at Ralph's, so they'll see my face. And I was like, and you have no bit of business, and you spent before you had any business to spend that money on.
That's
so
right.
It was like, pull back and let's just get business first. And then once you have that, then budget the other stuff.
To be creative a little bit. Do the bread and butter and then be creative later. And you asked, the second part of your question was, what are the disadvantages? I think, you make a great point. People can get paralyzed by like, oh, I got to learn this, I got to learn that, and then they're never doing business. They're just learning platforms.
Right.
I think to me, one of the biggest challenges with technology is because with the organizations that I'm involved in, I somehow have involvement or oversee, or however you want to phrase it, over 1,000 agents. And consistently, whether they're $100 million producers or they're brand new, I see people confusing lead generation with marketing. Okay. So there's a lot of things you can do on technology platforms that I see as marketing.
Right.
Lead generation to me, which is the kind of the crux of the business. If you don't have leads, you're not in business.
That's right.
Lead generation to me is being belly to belly or phone to phone with a human being.
Yep. I agree.
That's it.
That's it.
Talking, asking permission to be put in the database, asking permission for a listing appointment, a buyer consultation, getting back in touch, putting on the drip, whatever that looks like. That's lead generation.
And that builds relationships, and that gets you into the door, and that gets you in front of people.
Exactly.
And building the relationship.
Yeah, I mean, if how are you going to make money if you don't have an appointment?
That's right.
So agents, I think, because you're asking about technology, agents sometimes go, oh, well, I'm really busy lead generating. I did an Instagram post, or I did this, or I did that. That's like tech based. It's like, well, did you talk to a person, or did you put something out there praying that someone was going to answer? If you have to pray for someone to answer, then that's marketing. If you're talking to someone with the chance of being rejected, then that's lead generation. That's how I look at it.
That's a really good distinction.
I like to dumb it down. It's like,
is somebody going to hang up on me and tell me, hey, bugger off? Then that's lead gen.
Yeah, and if you just are throwing something out there and praying, then that's marketing.
Yeah. No, that's
and so I think technology makes people think they're busy and productive when they're not.
And there's so many choices now.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, I spend an hour. And I do that like I do. I shoot my videos, but I give myself like 45 minutes to shoot some down and dirty videos, and then I'm done, then I'm on the phones. Like it's just and then I let my assistant edit them and all that stuff. I don't do any of that stuff anymore. And I'm just like, you do it. That's not what I'm doing. I'm back to calling, door knocking, we're networking, we're going out, we're meeting people in the community and all that good stuff. So like that's face to face, belly to belly. Yeah.
100%.
That's really.
So I think that's to me, one of the bigger drawbacks.
That's a good distinction though, because marketing, it's like, it used to be like marketing is flyers or mailers. And you're right, because there's so much technology that's on your phone, which is right at your desk. That could be very much confused with how your time is spent.
Yeah, I mean, someone could easily spend a whole day going through all their clients' Facebook page and friending their friends.
Yeah.
And they think they're lead generating, but you're not talking to anyone. All you're doing is liking someone and hoping, praying that they respond.
Wow, that's a really good distinction. I love that. What does value from an agent to their client look like now?
Well, like I said at the onset, clients have so much access to information that it's really hard to be ahead of the curve. So I think that, value has gotten much more splintered. And what I mean by that is it used to be like, hey, the value is I'll do a home price evaluation on your property. Or the value might be, here's the Lakers calendar. Or the value might be, here's some sunflower seeds or whatever, right? Or here's a recipe. Or here's my newsletter on, all that. And all that is value. Right? Got it. But now I think because information is so accessible, that you as an agent need to make an effort to, here's what I mean by splintered. You need to make an effort to get information that they can't get, and that's by networking with other agents and other professionals and seeing properties before they come on the market and all that kind of stuff. And it's also understanding what that specific client needs that would be value to them. So I think it requires a little more thought sometimes. So in other words, one client, they might have an issue around mortgage rates, and so that the value you can provide them is around that. And another one might have an issue around wanting to invest in real estate, and another one might have an issue about how effective would it be to redo the bathrooms before they sell, and so everyone has these different needs. And so I think it requires the agent to have enough knowledge and skill to be able to provide value that's meaningful for that client.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's also kind of like, I think nowadays we get such a bombardment of information. It's now our jobs to decipher some of it. I mean, and I don't by that mean decide for them what's right, but to interpret it in such a way to give them choices like, hey, I know that this is important to you, so here are the stats about your particular neighborhood. I thought this charts, ways to interpret data so that we're not dumbing it down, but in essence, picking things where it's simplifying, where they could read things at a glance. Because everybody, they don't want to necessarily go through 20 articles to get what we could give them in a couple of pages that they could get.
100%.
So it's value of information that we've kind of sifted through the muck for them.
100%. And, it kind of goes back to what I was saying before about a database. Because if you're using a really sophisticated database, you can categorize everyone in your system. Like, let's say you have 1,000 potential clients in your database. You can go, these 100 are buyers, these 100 are sellers, these 100 live in this neighborhood, these 100 have, where they're going to downsize and retire. You can categorize them any way you want.
Yep.
And then therefore, when you get information on downsizing and retiring,
be able to
okay, now I'm going to hit those
Yep.
100 people. Boom, I have an article for them, or I have a data point.
Yeah.
So that's why the database is so important, because then you can really tailor your messaging and therefore your value.
Yep. That's a really good point. What is, I know that we kind of talked about this a little bit, but I want you to explain this to other people. What does big data mean for individual agents when you talk about big data?
Well, I think for a lot of agents, it's, what's the word? It's kind of almost like beyond their scope, because, they might not know what it is. They don't know that they're participating in it, right?
Yeah.
Like their data is being captured all the time off their listings and off their social media and all kinds of places. I think if you're a big enough player, whether that's a brokerage or a big enough, team or producer that's, then your data actually is saleable. It's like something you can generate revenue from. I think for an individual agent, it's typically just great information to have. What is big data? It's like, they're monitoring everything. They're monitoring, is your client going to Home Depot? Is a potential client going to Home Depot? That means that might be a trigger to know that they might be selling soon. So An example that I'll give that I can actually relate to sort of more firsthand is at Keller Williams, we have a database system called Command. And Command, I think Inman News, I think it was maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago, named it, the best new technological
CRM.
development in real estate. So that was a great development. But now there's AI within Command that if you plug in a client's social media, you plug in how long they've been in a house, their age, if you plug in the right data, then it'll start tracking for you how likely a client is to buy or sell based on the words they're using on social media, based on what they're searching for shopping, based on how long they've lived somewhere. So all of a sudden it can tell you, these are your top 10 potential sellers, you better call them. These are your top 10 potential buyers, you better call them. Or these are your top 10 potential clients who are going to work with someone else.
Wow.
Right? So to me, that right there is good enough. But if you're big enough, I think it's actually a potential revenue stream.
Yeah.
I think it's harder for an individual, kind of normal agent to make it a revenue stream, but that might not be far off in the future.
Wow.
But I know bigger teams and brokerages can make it a revenue stream.
That is, like, when you think about technology and how much they know about us, like, this is like, that's just the tip of the iceberg. So like, that is a actual, when we say CRM, that's a, I just lost it. What is
Client
it?
relationship
management system. Yeah. That is a system that we use for our company. Individual agents use, a bunch of other choices that they have, but it is how you manage a database. And when you think about, that's just one system that we use, but companies all over the world hire companies to manage just that, so that they can predict their customers and what they would buy. This is how Facebook, how they can predict what their customers are wanting, what advertisers are getting success. Everybody's doing it. Not everybody knows about it or how deep it goes, but it is utterly fascinating
Well, and if I could just interject, I mean, all of us have experienced, going on Facebook, for example, clicking on an ad for tennis shoes.
Absolutely.
And then all of a sudden you're getting inundated by tennis shoes.
Yep.
Everywhere you look.
Same company and different companies, but they've got it. They've got it. Oh, she liked that, or he liked that.
That's big data in action.
In action, yep. And it's fascinating. We've even gone so far as like some friends of mine, one time we were sitting at dinner and we were like, let's just see like if you had your cell phone out, if you could talk about something, or even Alexa, if you were in your house, if you would talk about something, would they pick it up? And then all of a sudden, would you get advertisements on your phone? And sure enough, they did. And it was like, and they're saying, oh, no, we don't have anybody listening on your Alexa. Or, yeah, right. Not sure I believe in that. Going forward, what would you say and I think I can answer this, but I would say going forward, what piece of tech would you say every agent needs to have? Would you say it would be the database?
It has to be the CRM.
The CRM,
and that's like, to me, it's like real estate
Basic.
101.
Yeah.
There's a million other great things. There's ways to generate leads. Of course, there's social media. There's all kinds of different apps that do all kinds of things. So we could go through this massive list. Mm-hmm. But it's so deep and wide that I couldn't even start
But if you don't start with the database, you have nothing to build.
Yeah,
from.
If you don't start with it, that's to me like real estate 101.
Right.
I think AI or like the Chat GPT sort of
and that is like, actually we're leading into like the next question, which is fascinating to me. Like I was like resisting it and I didn't mean to
you're fine,
but I was like, I am so fascinated. There's a part of me, literally a part of me that's like, that is so creepy. It's so creepy. I have a resistance to it. And then I was like, well, I don't want to sift through 10 articles to think of like, because I do, like I shoot like, 5, Instagram videos, like boom, boom, boom. And I was like, what are the top 5 real estate articles that are in the news that I could just do 5-minute, 30-second videos, and then Chat GPT, like, do. I'm like, oh, well, that was helpful. That saved me like about 20 minutes of like looking online.
Yeah, I'm the same as you. I'm intimidated by those things at first. I'm famously quoted, this is back when I was still at Rolling Stone magazine, of like, the internet, like, no one's going to watch stuff on their phone. That's ridiculous, Oops. Eat my words, right? And I was like comparing it to beta versus VHS. Like, how long is that going to take for people to pivot from one technology to the other? But obviously, I was way wrong. And so I'm way more open to technologies now. Like, I was nervous about Chat GPT as an example, but I've played with it, and I know many of my agents use it for anything, writing hey, what's a good text to send all my clients about an open house or whatever, and it writes a better text than they can. And so back to what we were saying about it being leverage and whatever, it's like, okay, let's use it for good.
It's a time leverage.
It's a time leverage thing, and it might write something better or more efficiently or more accurately than you might.
Right.
I think the disadvantage of it, or the risk, the thing I'm most afraid of is being like kind of cloned, where like it can duplicate your voice and image or whatever, and it's not you, but it's you saying something that you didn't say or mean to say. Want to say.
Right. I'm
like,
with
so
you.
it can be used for not good in that way if someone has that desire. So those are my biggest concerns. I did read an article recently about a lot of people are afraid of technology in general, but AI specifically, like, it's going to take jobs away from people.
Right.
It's not. Most technological innovations have added jobs to the economy. What it does is it shifts jobs.
That's right.
So, maybe people that write copy. I'm just making this up. There's a writer's strike down the street, so maybe I shouldn't mention it. But maybe writers will play a different role because now people can use AI for certain writing things. But and I can't even estimate what it's going to be, but it will open up new jobs and expertises that will employ people in a different way. So
it was fascinating because I actually, and not many people know this, but I'm also a children's author. So I was like, oh my God, this is going to take away my, like, oh no, and then I was like, well, what if it just like, because they can't take away a human experience.
That's right.
They still can't do that. So I was like, well, I don't know. What if it helps you just get started? And they can't take away my personal experience. And then I was like, okay. And again, so you kind of like get that initial no, and then you have to maybe go, maybe that just is something to embrace it, breathe into it, because it's not going anywhere. And, my husband, who is like, he's a brilliant engineer, and, his mind is like always like forward thinking that way. Solution based. Oh my God. I mean, he's just all into it. Like, oh, check this out. Like he was like, oh, he had Chat GPT write me an Irish shanty about our Bernedoodle, like he's like having so much fun with this stuff. And I'm like, and I'm laughing because it's hilarious. And then he had it draw a picture, and I was like fascinated, and then I was like, well, maybe it could write, if I give it the stats for a new listing I have, maybe it writes a better description of a listing. And me being a writer, I actually kind of take pride in my listing descriptions, and I don't steal it from the MLS and other people's, I take pride in that kind of thing. And I was like, yeah, but there are days when I'm like having to fill all that stuff out, and I'm like, boy, it'd sure be nice if that description were like done and I didn't have to stop 30 minutes and, whatever. So I understand the leverage part of it, and it's just, it's already here. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah, for sure.
The cat's already out of the bag, and it's off and running. So it's just a matter of how we embrace it and what we do with it. And hopefully they will realize that there probably does need to be some oversight so that we protect.
It's a hard world to legislate, because unlike television, where it's like, okay, you're not allowed to swear on this channel or whatever it is, it's fairly easy to monitor. But the internet, or just technology and the internet, are so broad.
Oh my God, yes.
I don't know how you
wrangle it.
There you go. There's the new industry. That's how people get hired. They're technology monitors.
Yeah, right.
Technology
they're
police.
Like, how do we do this? And they'd have to develop a whole new that would be a full-time job, but that would definitely be a job for somebody.
Yep.
For sure. So what do you think? And this, of course, incorporating AI and what we talked about, what do you think agents now need to do to thrive and survive in this industry today?
Well, I'm going to first answer that as it relates to the sort of economic climate we're in.
Yeah.
Inventory's low. Prices, I read, at least nationally, have just started to drop on a national level for the first time in a long time, but that hasn't accelerated the velocity of the market.
Nope.
So I think agents, people in general, but agents, since that's what we're talking about, people tend to be fear-based. They tend to work from fear. And so when the economy is bad, and I'm using the air quotes for a reason, I'll explain it in a second. When the economy is bad or the market is slow, I think people get paralyzed.
Absolutely.
And so I think it's all the more important to sort of, to answer your question, to go and do the things we just talked about. Have a database, get belly to belly with people, offer value.
Yep.
And do it to more people, because there's less business, right? Like nationally, I'm not quoting exact numbers, but a year ago maybe we did 5 million transactions nationally, and now they're projecting 4 million, right? So that's a 20% decrease. So agents will leave the business, or are leaving the business. So there's fewer agents going after that smaller pie, but it's still right now, it's tighter. So you have to be willing to, I'll use a quote that I've heard from other industry leaders, you have to be willing to do what it takes to get your unfair share.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, are people doing business? Are people buying and selling? Are people getting divorced and dying and this and that? Of course.
Absolutely.
Is it less than it was last year or the year before? Apparently it looks that way.
Yep.
What are you going to do to stand out? That's the question I think that needs to be answered.
Yeah, and you got to be willing to double down and maybe work twice as hard than you have. It's easy when the getting's good, right?
Exactly.
Always easy when the getting's good, which is why when the getting's good, everybody floods our industry.
Well, that's right. I mean, especially in LA where we are, right? Like, think about this. In LA, you can, average, like in one of my offices, average sale price is $1.4 million. Okay. Yeah. So you sell 4 houses, you're making $100 grand almost, right?
Yeah.
Or actually more than $100 grand. In Tennessee, I'm just making it up, where the average sale price is maybe 150 or 200.
Yep.
You got to sell a lot of houses.
That's right.
And therefore, I'm going to maybe anger a lot of agents in Los Angeles, but you have to be a better agent.
You do.
You have to know more about how to transact, about how to do mortgages, about how to prospect, just everything. You have to be more competent, or you become more competent because you have to do more transactions just to afford groceries, right?
That's why volume is actually more important than sales price.
You mean, I think units, you mean?
Units,
units,
yeah, sorry. Yeah,
units, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
I always used to, as I coach agents, I ask, one of the questions I like to ask is, would you like one $10 million listing or 10 $1 million listings? And a lot of agents say the 10 million.
Yeah.
And I always say, you're wrong.
Wrong.
Take the 10 ones, because you'll have 10 signs and 10 open houses.
Absolutely. There's way more ways to generate business off of the 10 than you would the
I'd
one.
way rather launch my business on that. But people get romanticized the $10 million list.
And we get a little spoiled because this is kind of a recession-proof area we live in Southern California. But believe me, if you can dig down and deep, it's not easy here either. And it takes way more phone calls and more belly-to-belly conversations here sometimes than it does in
I
other
think
areas.
it's harder here too, in the sense that, when I talk to my fellow leaders around the country at Keller Williams, and they're like, oh, you're so lucky in California, the prices are so high. I'm like, yeah, but per capita we have probably 2 or 3 times the agents you have.
Absolutely.
Because you can make 25 to 50 grand
exactly
a sale.
That's right.
So, there's more.
Everybody wants a piece of there.
I think there's more real estate licenses here than driver's licenses.
I think you're correct.
I'm not sure.
I think you're correct. That makes sense.
But yeah, I think it really just comes down to, you got to do the push-ups. You got to go do the work. You got to go lead generate and get good at something. Like find a niche and be really good at that.
Yeah.
And provide value.
Yep, I agree 110%. Do you think, I know that, this is a service that's kind of popped up in the last few years, but you know how it used to be, especially when COVID hit, it was stay out of the house, don't come in here. We couldn't actually even do showings. So what started really coming about, which was kind of coming about anyway, was virtual showings. Virtual showings was one thing where everybody then expected a virtual tour of a house. That's kind of pretty much the standard norm now. But now it's kind of where they're now doing virtual furniture, virtual everything. And then it sort of became where people were buying virtually, not even stepping foot in the house. Do you think that that's going to become a wave of the future, or do you think it's still going to be even belly to belly with the house?
That's a really good question. I mean, I haven't researched any stats on that, but I will say, as a real estate investor myself, I have purchased a property sight unseen.
Okay.
Pictures and description, and had someone boots on the ground look at it for me, but I didn't see it. So I've done it myself. And obviously, Amazon is kind of an example. When Amazon became a thing, I was like, I like to go try things on, and I want to go to the store, and I want to test drive the car, and I want to try on the shoe, all that stuff. And now, I get an Amazon package to my house every day.
Yeah.
So exactly. I've adapted.
Same way.
So I was resistant, and then I adapted.
Too.
And so I think, sure, there'll be more virtual viewing and purchasing. Mm-hmm. And just like I said, you got to build your relationships belly to belly. I think still people want to touch and feel a house, right? Because
so
you can go look at, you can do great things with a photograph and with proper editing and lighting, and then you go there and you're like, oh, I didn't realize it was right next to a gas station.
That's exactly right.
So me personally, especially a place I'm going to live.
That's what I started to say. I think the difference would be primary residences versus an investment property.
Yeah, the one I bought sight unseen was a duplex that I wasn't going to live in, and it was in Arizona, and I was just like, the numbers are good.
The numbers work.
The numbers work.
So I think that might be the difference, but you'll start to see, I think that's going to be more incorporated, but I think you're right. I think still belly to belly for a home that you might be thinking about raising your kids in. You want to still walk in and feel that, I don't know, that je ne sais quoi, whatever you walk in and you want to feel that thing about a house. I had somebody walk in and go, I still say that with clients, there is that thing you do walk in and you go, I could see my stuff here.
Yep.
And some people they're like, nope. And I'm like, then this is not it. It's not it. And that's okay.
Totally.
We'll find another one that isn't. So I know that we covered quite a bit. I mean, is there any advice you would give of technology or what? I mean, other than a CRM, which we covered that, and just really differentiating yourself in this market, which is really developing basically a skill set to just really hone in on, because obviously we're in a difficult market. And I think you're right. You do have to differentiate yourself in that, it's I think the only way to really survive in this business is I've been in it almost 20 years now. And it's there is no resting on your laurels. You have to keep learning and keep growing, or
100%.
you will die, because it just,
especially if you want to have a diverse client base,
exactly.
right? Like if you're only dealing with, 70-year-olds or whatever, maybe you don't need to adapt as much technology.
Right.
But if you're trying to
millennials are going to be the largest buying pool that we're going to have for the next 25 years.
Yeah, so you have to adapt to that. I mean, I think the answer is, of course, the CRM. I think obviously social media.
Yep.
I think, and there's millions of platforms that can make you better at all these things. So like you had mentioned earlier, you shoot a lot of videos. Okay, great. Well, there's a million video platforms that can make your video look more professional, or add music, or add insert different things.
Right.
So instead of going through all that list, like if that's someone's niche, then they need to find that support. Yep. I think the most important thing besides the CRM, what I've mentioned, and social media, which I think are unavoidable to use, really. The next thing is leads, right? Like the next thing is, how are you getting leads? And I'm not necessarily an advocate of paying for leads.
Right.
I would rather get them organically. I mean, still, I think at the height, it was about 75% of the average agent's business came from their sphere, people that they know. And now that number's decreased a little bit. It's in the 60s, according to NAR. And that's probably because of technology, that drop.
Right.
But it's still 65%, let's say. That's a massive piece of your business.
Right.
But the next thing I think that I would add on is like, okay, are you willing to invest money and resources into getting leads? Because ultimately, how do you win the game? Go on more appointments.
That's right.
Go on more appointments, get better at your skills, close more deals.
That's how you do it.
Great. So I'd say, the CRM, social media, and the tools that maybe make your social media look and presentation better. Then the next thing would be buying leads. Of course, organizational things, but that can be part of your CRM. Then I'll add one thing that, you might not expect me to say is that, it's very easy in this business to lose your life balance. And so I think technology can be a great way to help one have a better life balance. I mean, so many realtors are kind of really working 7 days a week, right? They're taking those calls, texts, emails, whenever the phone rings.
That's right.
And they're not in control. They don't really have boundaries, right? Because they're, I don't want to say desperate, but eager to serve their client base. And so, I don't know, is that a meditation app? Is that doing, exercises? Is that some way to organize yourself? Is it, shutting off your phone? Whatever. There's all kinds of technological tools that can help you
really
have a balance in your life. So I think if you use the CRM and you're lead generating and you're buying leads and you're using social media and then you have life balance and you shut off a little bit, I think you'll be more successful than adding another piece of technology that's going to stress you out more.
Right. And, they usually say if it's not in your schedule, it doesn't exist.
That's right.
So it's usually a good thing to do your lead gen in the morning, set that time aside, and really follow your schedule, because that's the best time to do it. That's when everybody's usually more receptive. The afternoons are usually for appointments, and then you can cut off. It is okay to cut off. And then you treat people how you want to be treated. So like if you say, look, I'll return your phone call next morning at 8 a.m., great. Then people will start to expect that from you, so that they don't call you at 9 p.m. at night in panic and you don't feel like you need to call them. So it's still very professional. You're still taking care of everybody, but at the same time, you're taking care of yourself. And that's always really important. You have been amazing. And I'm sure that we could do 5 more episodes with you here about a myriad of things.
I'll call my agent. We'll book it.
Thank you, Rob, so much for coming and taking the time out. I know you had quite a drive, but I so appreciate it. So appreciate your time. He's one of the best in the business, and we're lucky to have had him. So thank you so much for coming out for the Real Estate of Mind. Would you like anybody to be able to get a hold of you? How can they get a hold of you?
I guess the easiest way, my email is on the screen. It's rob@robaigner.com. And then I have a podcast, and that can be reached at Clear Choices is the name of the podcast. So it's on all the major platforms.
That is amazing. And thank you. And just be sure to check us out at our YouTube channel. We are now bite-sizing our YouTube channel for the Real Estate of Mind. And check us out on our Instagram at My City of Angels and OC and Me. And of course on Facebook. We are there, and we would love for you to like and subscribe. And remember, without you, there is no us. So thank you for spending some time with us on our Real Estate of Mind. And we'll be back for another couple of episodes. So stay tuned.